Adaku had always been the quiet one, soft-spoken, patient, the kind of sister who stayed in the background while everyone else shined. She was the eldest daughter, and from a young age, she took on responsibilities far beyond her years. When their father passed away, it was Adaku who helped their mother hold the family together. She sold handmade crafts at the market, cooked, cleaned, and even skipped school some days just to care for her younger sister, Ngozi. Ngozi, in contrast, was full of life, bubbly, beautiful, and constantly surrounded by praise. From the moment she turned 16, people in the neighborhood would whisper about how stunning she was, and how she was destined for a rich husband or a glamorous future. Their mother, Mama Ifeoma, would beam with pride whenever Ngozi walked into a room, calling her the flower of the family. Even though Adaku worked herself to the bone, her efforts often went unnoticed. If she bought food for the house, it was Ngozi who got the last piece. If she came home tired, no one asked how her day went. But Adaku never complained. She believed that family meant sacrifice. She believed that if she just kept giving, one day she'd be seen, loved, appreciated. What hurt the most wasn't Ngozi's success. It was how easily the world chose Ngozi over her. Again and again, even though it was Adaku who made sure her sister had shoes for school, transport for auditions, and a shoulder to cry on. Still, she smiled. Still, she clapped the loudest for Ngozi, because that's what big sisters are supposed to do, until the day her heart was shattered by the very person she loved most. Everyone in the family saw it. Mama Ifeoma had a favorite, and it was never a secret. From the way she smiled at Ngozi to the way she barely looked at Adaku, it was clear who was treasured and who was tolerated. When Adaku brought home good grades or helped fix things around the house, Mama would nod and move on. But if Ngozi so much as walked into the room wearing a new dress, Mama's eyes would light up like a festival. "My star," she would call her. "My pride." Adaku pretended not to notice, but the sting never left her heart. One year, Adaku had saved up every coin she earned from making beads and sewing clothes, all just to pay for her own school fees. She had dreams, simple but strong. She wanted to finish school, maybe even study accounting one day. But then Ngozi was invited to a modeling audition in the city, and Mama Ifeoma said there was no money to send her. That same night, Mama sat Adaku down and said, "You're the strong one. You can always go back to school later. But your sister, this is her only chance." Without protest, Adaku handed over her savings. She watched as her school dreams slipped away, replaced by bus tickets, new clothes, and a camera portfolio for Ngozi. No one thanked her. No one asked how she felt. Mama Ifeoma simply said, "You did the right thing." Adaku smiled weakly, but inside something cracked. It wasn't just about money. It was about being invisible, being used, loving a family that only remembered her when they needed something and forgot her just as quickly when the lights turned on Ngozi. Adaku wasn't looking for love. She had already learned that life didn't hand her things easily. But then she met Chijioke, a new teacher who had just moved into their neighborhood. He wasn't flashy or loud like the boys Ngozi liked. Chijioke was calm, respectful, and kind. He noticed Adaku when no one else did. He greeted her with warmth, asked about her day, even helped her carry heavy buckets from the well when her hands were full. Slowly, Adaku let her guard down. They started talking after his evening classes. At first, it was just friendly chats, but soon they were sharing meals, stolen glances, and whispered dreams under the mango tree behind the church. No one knew they were seeing each other. Adaku liked it that way. It was quiet, peaceful, hers. For once, something belonged to her. Chijioke spoke to her like she mattered. He encouraged her to keep studying, told her she was smart, capable, worthy. She started to believe him. But just when everything felt like it was finally going right, Chijioke changed. One day, he didn't show up for their usual evening walk. Then he stopped replying to her messages. Days turned into weeks. He was still in town, still teaching, but it was like she no longer existed. Adaku didn't understand. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. She would see him laughing with others, looking happy, while she held back tears behind her stall. Her heart felt like it had been stolen and thrown away, and the worst part, she never told anyone about him, not even Ngozi. It was a secret love, and now it felt like a secret heartbreak. Adaku was left alone once again, wondering what she had done wrong. Months passed, and Adaku buried her pain in silence. She never told anyone about Chijioke, or how he had vanished without a word. She focused on her work, keeping her hands busy so her heart wouldn't break all over again. Then one morning, Mama Ifeoma burst into the room with the biggest smile Adaku had ever seen. "Ngozi is getting married!" she shouted, waving a golden invitation. The house was soon buzzing with excitement. Dresses, music, guest lists. Everyone talked about how Ngozi had finally found a rich, respectable man. "He's private," Mama said proudly, "but powerful. She will be the envy of the whole village." Adaku stayed quiet. She didn't care who it was. She just hoped Ngozi would be happy. A few days later, the formal invitation arrived. It was beautiful. Gold leaf edges, ribbon, and a photo of Ngozi and the groom. Adaku's hands trembled as she held it. And then her heart stopped. There he was, Chijioke, smiling beside Ngozi, dressed in expensive clothes, his arm around her waist. Adaku couldn't breathe. The man she once shared secrets with, the man who told her she was special, was marrying her sister. Adaku stood frozen, every sound around her fading into a blur. No one noticed the way her lips parted, the way her fingers tightened around the card. Inside, her world shattered. So this was why he had disappeared. He didn't just leave, he chose her sister, her blood, her own family, and worst of all, Ngozi had no idea. Or maybe she did. Adaku couldn't tell what hurt more, the betrayal or the silence that followed it. She forced a smile as Mama danced around the room, but something inside her cracked wide open, and this time, it would not heal quietly. Adaku finally gathered the courage to ask her mother the question that had been burning in her chest. She waited until the house was quiet, then whispered, "Mama, did you know about Chijioke and me?" Mama Ifeoma barely looked up from folding clothes. "Of course," she said calmly, as if she were talking about the weather. Adaku's heart sank. Her mother knew. "Then why did he end up with Ngozi?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mama sighed, like she was tired of explaining something obvious. "Because Ngozi is more presentable. She fits better with someone like Chijioke. You're quiet, ordinary, a good girl, yes, but not for a man like that." Adaku felt the words slap her harder than any hand ever could. She stood there, frozen, as Mama folded the last wrapper and placed it on the pile. "You must not say anything," Mama continued sharply. "Ngozi is happy. She's bringing honor to this family. We cannot afford scandal. Do not ruin this wedding. Be a good sister." A good sister. The same words Adaku had lived by her whole life. The same words that had made her sacrifice school, work till her fingers bled, and smile through every heartbreak. But now, those words felt like chains. Mama didn't see her pain. She didn't care. All that mattered was Ngozi's beauty, Ngozi's marriage, Ngozi's happiness. Adaku wanted to scream, but instead, she swallowed her tears like she always did. Her chest burned, but she nodded. "Yes, Mama," she said softly. But deep inside, something shifted. For the first time, Adaku realized that being a good sister had cost her everything, and this time, she wasn't sure she could keep pretending. Not anymore. The morning of the wedding was loud with music, laughter, and the sweet smell of jollof rice and roasted goat. Guests filled the compound in colorful clothes, singing Ngozi's praises. Adaku watched from her window, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She had barely slept. The pain, the betrayal, the shame, everything sat heavy in her chest. She thought of walking away, disappearing quietly, like always. But something in her snapped. For once, she didn't want to be invisible. With trembling hands, she reached under her bed and pulled out the old white gown she had sewn years ago for a church play. Simple, long and laced with delicate beading. She had kept it hidden, untouched, dreaming one day she might wear it for her own love story. Now it would serve a different purpose. Adaku slipped into the dress. Her heart thumped wildly as she fixed her hair, added a veil, and stepped out. The crowd outside was too busy cheering to notice her. She moved quietly, like a shadow, sneaking around the side of the house. The venue was packed, people dancing and shouting blessings for the bride. No one recognized her. Just another bride in white, they thought. Maybe part of the performance. She slipped inside the hall just as the music changed. The real bride hadn't walked in yet. Adaku took slow, steady steps down the aisle. Her eyes locked on Chijioke, standing at the altar. He froze when he saw her. His smile vanished. Murmurs rose in the room. Some gasped. Some stared. Mama Ifeoma's jaw dropped. Adaku kept walking. Each step was a scream, a cry, a truth finally told without words. Today she wasn't going to be ignored. Not anymore. This was no longer just Ngozi's wedding. It was Adaku's moment too. As the music swelled and guests rose to their feet, everyone turned to admire the bride making her entrance. But then a murmur spread across the hall. From the opposite end of the aisle, another figure in white was walking, calm, steady, and sure. People gasped. Some blinked in disbelief. Others whispered, confused. It was Adaku. She was dressed in a wedding gown, veil lifted just enough to show her face. But there was no fear in her eyes, only quiet fire. All eyes turned from Ngozi, who was just about to step forward, to the woman who now stood at the altar. Chijioke's face went pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Adaku stood in front of him and her sister, her voice soft, but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "I was the one you loved," she said, her eyes fixed on Chijioke. "I was the one you held hands with in secret, the one you promised a future to, until you vanished." The crowd gasped again. Mama Ifeoma tried to stand, but her legs shook. Ngozi looked stunned, then furious, but Adaku didn't flinch. "I stayed quiet when you left me," she continued, voice trembling now, but she didn't stop. "I stayed silent when Mama told me to bury the truth, but I won't stay quiet today." She looked at her sister. "You took what wasn't yours, and you knew it." Ngozi shouted, "You're ruining my wedding!" But Adaku shook her head. I'm saving myself." The hall was silent. For once, Adaku wasn't invisible. Her truth stood tall before them all, clothed in courage and pain. And in that moment, she was no longer the forgotten sister. She was the storm they never saw coming. The air inside the hall felt heavy, like it could crack open at any second. Whispers ran through the crowd like fire. "Is that really her? She dated Chijioke? What's going on?" Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others stared in stunned silence. But then, from the back, someone began to clap, just once, then again. A few more joined in, clapping softly, not out of celebration, but out of respect for Adaku's courage. The sound echoed like thunder in the tense room. Ngozi, now red with anger and embarrassment, stepped forward with clenched fists. "You're lying! You've always been jealous of me. You couldn't stand that someone finally chose me." But Adaku didn't argue. She simply reached into the small white clutch she carried and pulled out a small bundle. Her fingers shook slightly, but her eyes were calm. One by one, she held up the proof. First, a photo of her and Chijioke at the school library, smiling under the shade of the old mango tree. Then a worn letter, his handwriting still clear, promising to build a life with her. Finally, the promise ring, small, silver, and unmistakable. The same ring Chijioke once placed on her finger, calling her his future. The room went silent again. Ngozi's mouth opened, then closed. Chijioke couldn't even meet Adaku's eyes. He looked down, ashamed. Adaku didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She stood still, letting the truth speak louder than any scream. The guests now looked at her not with pity, but with awe. She had been quiet all her life, but now she had the entire room in the palm of her hand. She wasn't just telling her story, she was reclaiming her name, and no one could deny her anymore. Chijioke stood frozen as the weight of Adaku's words, and her evidence, sank into the crowd, like a stone dropped into still water. Murmurs gave way to uncomfortable silence as all eyes turned to him. Finally, he stepped forward, his voice low and shaken. I owe everyone the truth, he said, his eyes flicking between Adaku and the stunned guests. I loved Adaku, I still do, but when Mama Ifeoma came to me, she told me if I wanted a better life, I had to choose Ngozi. She said Adaku wasn't fit to be the wife of someone with ambition. Gasps rippled through the room. Mama Ifeoma turned pale, her proud posture collapsing in an instant. I was weak, Chijioke continued. I let myself be guided by fear, by status, by appearances. I betrayed the only woman who truly believed in me when I had nothing. Adaku, I am sorry. Adaku looked at him for a long moment. There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded. I forgive you, she said softly, her voice clear. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll forget who I am again. Then with grace and quiet strength, Adaku turned around. Her steps were slow but certain. The crowd parted for her without a word, watching in silence as she walked out, head held high, dress flowing like a queen's robe. She didn't need their pity. She didn't need Chijioke's apology to stay. She had already won, not because she ruined the wedding, but because she reclaimed her voice, her worth, and her future. And in that moment, everyone saw what they had ignored for years. Adaku was never the shadow. She was the light they refused to see. Until now. Months passed, and the scandal that shook the wedding slowly faded from the headlines. But Adaku, she was just getting started. She was no longer the quiet, forgotten sister, no longer hidden in the shadow of her family's expectations. She had chosen truth over everything, the truth about her love, her heartache, and her worth. And now, the world was finally seeing her for who she truly was. Adaku opened her own fashion workshop in the heart of the city, a space dedicated to empowering underprivileged girls. It wasn't just about teaching them how to sew or design. It was about showing them they could build a future on their own terms, free from the chains of tradition and expectation. Adaku taught them that strength comes from within, that their dreams were valid, no matter their background or circumstances. The workshop quickly became a sanctuary, a place where young girls who had never been given a chance found a family in Adaku. They learned to stitch their own stories, weaving together the fabric of their futures with confidence and ambition. The walls, once bare, now displayed beautiful designs, each one telling a tale of resilience and determination. And just when it seemed like her life had reached its pinnacle, Adaku's story went viral. Videos of her workshops and the girls she mentored flooded social media. People from all over the country shared her story, applauding her for standing up when no one thought she could. She had chosen herself over the traditions that tried to keep her down, and it inspired thousands. Adaku was no longer just a local hero. She was a symbol of courage, of defying the odds, of reclaiming your voice. The nation had watched her rise from the ashes of betrayal, and now they respected her, not just as Ngozi's sister, but as Adaku, a force to be reckoned with. If Adaku's journey inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. Stay true to yourself, even when the world tries to silence you.